We're kicking in gear, the afternoon portion of the program now with Senator Daniel Sparks. He represents District 5, which includes Itawamba, Prentiss, and Tishomingo counties. Serves as the chair of the Economic and Workforce Development Committee, Vice Chair, Judd B. Committee. Always good to see you, Senator. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Gerard. Good to be with you. Always enjoy a visit.
I don't know if I shared with you that back before Christmas, I was honored to travel up to J.P. Coleman State Park. Tishomingo County was invited by Representative Bubba Carpenter over on the House side. There's, I can't remember the name of it, the Development Foundation, I think.
That's correct.
Economic
yes.
Group. And it's that part of the state's just absolutely breathtakingly beautiful, and it's so different than the rest of the state. We're blessed in Mississippi with the multiple landscapes.
We are, and I regret I wasn't able to be there that night when you were there, but they did brag on you as well.
Oh,
you did a wonderful job.
Appreciate that.
But I'm very fortunate that that's home. It's been home to my parents, to my grandparents. We've been a big part of Northeast Mississippi in our lives, and the people are as good as the beauty. So,
no doubt.
Good people.
No doubt. Enjoyed so much being with them. They were so accommodating, so gracious, and I appreciate them giving me a little time to present some stuff to them, and that was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed that. All right, so you have been spearheading, shall we say, some reforms to attempt to stabilize the public employees retirement system, also known as PERS. In full disclosure to the audience, you and I have had many offline conversations about this. Always enjoy those. And I'll tell the audience this, that you may disagree with the senator's policies here, but one thing you can't disagree with is whether or not he understands this problem and understands what has to be done to fix it. And I appreciate that. You and I have had lots of exchanges on that, and sometimes I'll sort of hit you with some questions. Are you sure about this, that, and the other? And you always do a great job of, no, here's why, and you'll substantiate your position with mathematical financial data, which is the way it should be, because this is a financial mathematical problem.
It is. It most certainly is, and it touches so many lives in the state of Mississippi with over 100,000 active employees, over 100,000 retirees, and as I've told people before, either someone's spouse, parent, or child is likely on PERS, and sometimes all three. And the one thing I've always been very clear about, the employees have done their part. The employees have rendered the service, whether they're a current employee or a retiree. They have earned their benefits. They are in their tier. They're locked in. Nothing in this legislation would change any benefit they have. The purpose of this legislation is to strengthen the system, because whatever decisions have been made in the past, and we'll certainly talk about some of those, has led us to a $26.5 billion, with a B, unfunded actuarial accumulated liability. So what we've been doing has put us in financial duress as it relates to actuaries, believing we're now below the yellow line and into the red. And so we needed to do something different. Last year, a bill came over from the House, 1590, that purported to disband the board in its current composition and encourage the board to put together a Tier 5. The board asked for a Tier 5 last year. The members of the PERS were very upset, and they expressed that in communications directly to us on the Senate side once that House bill came over, that they wanted to elect their board members, that their board members had their best interest in mind, their board members were experts in the field, and they trusted their board members, and that the legislature should listen to the board members. So this past year, after we got out of session, I was appointed as a legislative liaison member of the PERS Board of Trustees by the Lieutenant Governor. He has 2 appointments, and the House Speaker has 2 appointments. So we worked the last several months with the PERS Board, with the same group of people that they last year asked us to listen to, and we worked with them to craft a Tier 5 that ultimately received an endorsement of the PERS Board on December 18th in their board meeting. It was presented by their actuaries in November. It was rediscussed again in the December meeting and was voted on, and it was a 8-1 vote to endorse the framework of the Tier 5, which is what we presented in the Senate and what ultimately is an HB 1 that the governor, I believe, is intending to sign today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I'm going to back up just for a minute and assume that there may be some in our audience that don't understand what actuaries do. And these are just people that work with retirement systems, defined benefit plans such as PERS, but mainly they work for insurance companies and they estimate risk. Their job is to use a bunch of statistical modeling to try to figure out what risk is. Because if you think about premiums coming in and benefits going out, that's not static. That's very dynamic.
That's correct.
And you're trying to essentially estimate what that looks like and make sure that your plans, your programs, your financial model is stable to accommodate those risks, and that you've got those risks addressed and mitigated. The risk we have here is that if we don't do something, we're not going to be able to make benefits in full down the road a long time. We want to be clear. It's not like next year this is going to be a problem. Not the dire situation Social Security and Medicare are in, where we're looking at within the decade.
That's
that
correct.
Becomes a problem.
We have $26.5 billion of that actuary-determined unfunded liability. We have $35 billion of assets.
Right.
So the other thing is what you touched on, the board also makes the decision for the plan, for the investments, all of those different things, and the actuaries are making educated guesses.
That's right.
Because they're having to use mortality tables about people's death. They're having to use other guesstimates, and one of the problems in the prior tier was that there was so many different ways you could accumulate service time for which no one had paid in money,
right?
And it would skew the numbers. Partial lump sum option of taking money, you cannot actuarially forecast that. So some of the ups and downs that we've had in PERS is because of the uncertainty, and we're trying to bring more certainty into it to stabilize. And then, of course, the additional concerns were that the board made some decisions to lower the estimated rate of return from 7.75 to 7 within the last 5 years, and that actually inflated the liabilities by $6 billion roughly. And that doesn't mean they lost $6 billion.
Right.
It just means in the future they're going to calculate a lower number. So we just, the board had asked us to do a tier. Even my colleagues, that some of them that didn't vote for the bill, admitted we have to have a different tier. This was the tier that was presented by the actuaries. This is the tier and the framework that the board endorsed, and it's the one we went with. Now, late in the game, somebody ran out with another defined benefit plan and said, well, if we'll just reduce the benefits, this is as good or better. It's not as good or better. The actuaries said as much. In 2064, it would be 10.5% less funded, which was $15 billion less funded. The other thing, and you understand this, and we can get into defined benefit and defined contribution, but when you have a defined benefit, all the risk is on the plan sponsor, which is not just the state. It's every school district. It's every
employer.
County. Everybody owns a certain amount of that $26.5 billion. And I actually brought you a copy of the breakdown to the penny of everybody's piece of that. So it's not like they're looking at the state and going, well, the legislature has to handle this. This is all our counties, all our school districts, our IHL institutions, our community colleges. Each of them have a piece of this debt, this liability, on their books.
That's
GASB requires it. The financial accounting standards requires it. And it's ultimately going to affect our bond rating. So when we get to the point that you can't bond for a new building on an IHL campus, or DeSoto County, which has $697 million of this liability just in their school system, because they're the largest school system. DeSoto County has some sewer and water issues up there that we're trying to work as a legislature to help them, because of working with Memphis and over the years. They're going to have to spend some major infrastructure dollars. They've had tremendous growth. If it hurts that county's ability to bond, because they have to disclose $697 million of, that's just the school district's debt. That's why we needed to do something. It's not to hurt anybody's hiring abilities. It's not to reduce someone's benefit. It is to stabilize this plan before it affects the state of Mississippi and our subunits of government ability to bond and function.
It's a great point, because I'm not sure that the majority of our public understands that the audited financial statements produced for every public sector entity in the state that has employees that participate in PERS, which is every one of them, they have a significant footnoted section in their financial statements disclosing their portion of the PERS liability. And to your point, just so our audience will know, when they get ready to go borrow money for, is really what we're talking about, when that goes to the market, they look at those financial statements, they see that liability, they get a little nervous, and they either don't approve the bond or they approve it at a higher interest rate to mitigate that risk.
So it costs them money, and these same people last year, when the board wanted to raise the rate by 5%, said we can't stand it. We're already paying 17.4, and
right.
If we had gone to 22.4, that's a 5% cost on labor to every school district, every IHL, every city, every county.
Right. Daniel Sparks is our guest in the Element Wealth studio. He's a senator from up there in Northeast Mississippi. We're coming right back to talk about PERS. Stay with us. Well, studio, we're visiting with Senator Daniel Sparks talking about PERS. So let's also do this, Senator. Back up and explain to our audience exactly what a tier is.
Oh, that's a great question. I had somebody ask me the other day, why are you doing this Tier 5? I didn't pull that number out of thin air. We have 4 prior tiers, so this is not something unprecedented. And again, I want to make sure people understand nothing in this tier affects the rights of people in Tier 1 through 4.
Or current retirees.
That's right, every one of those folks. But we've toggled this thing. In 1990, there was a piece of legislation that did an optional retirement program. I'll circle back to that. That was just for institutions of higher learning. In 1999, a cost of living adjustment, 3% compounded, was added. In the past, the board had to vote on each year what the cost of living should be, kind of like Social Security does. Mm-hmm. But they fixed that in 99, and they did it retroactively to people that had not paid in on it. And, of course, we've been paying this benefit. That has been a big part of the PERS liability. But once again, these employees and retirees, that's the deal they bargained for, and we owe it, and we're going to pay it. But those are the things that put us where we are. Then they begin to see some issues. Around 2007 or so, they tweaked again. They went from 25-year to 30-year retirement. And then in 2011, they tweaked the system again. So they've gone in and tried to do these little adjustments to the plan, and they continue to dig us deeper and deeper into debt. So the people who are saying, hey, just do this defined benefit plan that, a board member, by the way, the board speaks through their minutes, and I'm going to leave you a copy of these minutes on this 8-to-1 vote. But just because a board member goes out and on a personal mission begins to push a plan, that's their right as a citizen. But the board endorsed this plan, this Tier 5.
Okay.
But that is kind of what we've been dealing with is, do you just tweak it again, or do you actually go in and try to stabilize it? So that's what we're trying to do, in addition to more money. We know more money is necessary. The legislature voted last year to increase the employer side of the contribution by 2.5% over 5 years, half a point each year. That is several $100 million more dollars that will go into the system. We also put $110 million in last year. I believe the lieutenant governor stated the other day it's his desire to put $200 million in this year. And then we have part of this reform to the ORP package is going to deliver an incremental climbing of $2.5 million up to $40 million annually. So 8 to 10 years from now, we'll be picking up $30 to $40 million a year because of the reform that we did to the ORP program. Okay. That's without raising anybody's taxes. That's without going up on anything. So
explain that to the folks. This ORP program is something that's available to those that work for institutes of higher learning.
Correct.
Right? It's limited to just them.
That just them, and even certain categories within that.
Other retirement plan, by the way, I think is what it stands
optional.
for. Optional.
So
pardon me.
The first thing you do, you come in, and if you are one of these quote qualifiers, then you're offered the first 30 days go into PERS with all of us, or opt out. So they opted out. The problem is, years ago, they tied the contribution to the PERS contribution rate. Well, as the debt has gone up, we've continually added more and more contribution rate. Well, the people in ORP were getting a match that was in the teens. It's 14.9% on their 9%. It's egregious.
So for the benefit of folks that are listening, if you're familiar with the standard private sector 401k plan, for example, you contribute to it, and your employer will also contribute something to it. Typically, it's less than a dollar for dollar match. It's
correct.
50 cents on a dollar is a fairly common model. But in this particular case, the ORP offered to these employees of Mississippi's colleges and universities, they actually get almost a double match. I mean, it's completely inconsistent with the typical private sector that goes to their personal plan, not going to the PERS program. And that's part of the reason we have this funding problem.
That's correct. 2.5% went to PERS. So I had a lot of back and forth. I understand the IHL's position on it. It's a great deal if you could get it. But it's $503 million worth of payroll. So the IHL's putting up almost $100 million of match, and 2.5% of that is all that's coming to PERS going forward. And we're not going to clip a current ORP participant. We're going to freeze them where they are. As the rate continues to go up on the other side, more of that will go to PERS. So we are generating more money. Any future ORP hire will be up to 9%.
Which is the amount they contribute.
That's right.
We're matching it dollar for dollar.
That's correct. And we're going to pick up an additional 7.5%. So if we keep this roughly $500 million worth of payroll, you can see how 8, 10, 12 years out, I'm going to pick up $7.5 million per $100 million. So I'm getting $30 or $40 million going toward directly to the unfunded actuarial liability. We are also looking at taking part of the 2% set aside, taking a piece of that and dedicating it to PERS funding. We want to get to that $100 million figure roughly. I realized the House had taken the lottery money up to $100 million. I didn't support doing it that way because I feel like that $80 million that's been going to MDOT has been doing a good thing. The next 20 goes to EEF, which is education funding. And the problem was one of the differences in the two tax plans was that because they took that $100 million away from MDOT and EEF, they then wanted a greater gas tax increase. So they were going out and telling PERS community, and the PERS people picked up on this because they're asking us, where's our dedicated stream of funding? And I promise you, we are working on that, and we intend to deliver on it. But we're not going to raise your taxes to do it if we can help it. And that's what was happening.
Okay.
They were going to divert $100 million, but then raise your gas taxes to pay for that piece of it.
I mean, you could, I think, make the case that essentially we're paying for PERS at the gas pump.
You would have been if you'd gone that route. That's right.
And the reason I say that is because we're eliminating the dedicated stream of revenue from the lottery.
Yeah, but we didn't.
Right, I know.
Yeah,
I'm talking about the House bill.
That's exactly what it would have done. You're correct. 100%.
So essentially, rather than lottery proceeds funding roads and bridges to the tune of $80 million a year, we're eliminating that, diverting that to PERS, but then we're increasing taxes on fuel, which is generates more than the $80 million.
That's
because
right.
I think most people believe, in the legislature at least, the Department of Transportation needs more than $80 million a year. They're getting that now, but. Yeah, so this is a conundrum. But the point I wanted to make about the tiers is that it depends on when you entered the system, when you went to work
100%.
For the system. And so through the years, those were adjusted for the number of years it requires to vest and the number of years that determine your average pay and some of the calculation formulas that determine benefits. And also the contribution rates changed somewhat through the years as well.
That's exactly right. Each tier had a different calculation of
It's
benefits.
It's
a different plan, but based on your date of hire. So Tier 5 employees have yet to be hired. So any Mississippi employee or retiree today, Tier 5 does not affect you.
Right.
So one of the things we're going to look at as well is potentially diverting interest on some of the money that we have setting aside, working cash stabilization fund. We're going to find $100 million to put toward it without raising your taxes. That is my commitment. That is what I'm trying to help push. And then the other thing we're going to start looking at, and I've talked with my fellow board members at PERS, we got a problem with contract labor in the state of Mississippi. I don't mind people contracting labor, but when you contract things out, and some of the offenders in the contract world are PERS retirees. They retire from PERS, they set out for 90 days, then they come back on contract. I have no problem with that. I'm proud that they have an opportunity to earn and enjoy their retirement, but there needs to be some calculation or assessment, if you will, on those types of contracts, because otherwise they would be in PERS. I have a bus driver shortage up in our neck of the woods. We have retired bus drivers who want to drive, but they have a cap on this, 50% pay, 50% work, or 25% of your average wage. And so there are many things that we can do to help people continue to work, to help stabilize the system, even if they're in a situation that they're a retiree that want to go back and work on contract. But, the board is committed to finding more funding. The legislature is committed to finding more funding. But we had to have reform to the plan to make the funding make the impact it needs to make.
We may need to continue in the next segment, but let's do a rundown of what Tier 5 entails and how that differs from Tier 4.
Sure. Tier 4 was a defined benefit plan, which means based on the number of years you worked and your average salary over your high 4 years, you received a stream of income in the future for the rest of your life, and there was a cost of living adjustment that you received based on the 1999 legislation. The difference in Tier 5 is that you make the same employee contribution of 9%. 4% goes to a defined benefit, so it's a future flow of income. It has a lower service year credit. It does not have a guaranteed COLA, but we have the option to do that COLA, and it's based on your high 8 years. We allow military service credit for 4 years, and you have 8 years to vest. The disability rules haven't really changed. We don't allow partial lump sum because you have a defined contribution.
Which is current and available, I should say, in Tier 4.
Yes, because they didn't have any money to take with them. Yeah. The other 5% goes to a defined contribution 401k style plan. That's their money. It vests with them, and they could actually pierce that in the purpose of a hardship, illness, sickness. So it's money that our state employees actually have access to.
Gotcha.
Currently, it's only a future flow of income.
Yeah. So this is thought to, well, the actuaries have done the math, said, yeah, this will help us achieve stability.
Roughly 2% more on every dollar of payroll, which is $140 million on a $7.2 million payroll.
Senator Daniel Sparks, thanks for coming in, man.
Thank you
really
so much,
good job.
Gerard.
Thank you. We're coming right back. Joining us today, we've got Senator Daniel Sparks. Ask him to stay over, and let's talk a little bit about taxes. But before we get there, just cleaning up and kind of wrapping up this discussion about the new tier in the public employees retirement system. So anybody that comes to work in the public sector in Mississippi, effective this July 1st, right?
March 1st of 26.
Okay, well, I may be having that confused with SLRP, which we probably,
correct.
I think I got them confused. My bad. Two different sets of dates. All right, so March 1st, 26, anybody that enters the system as a public sector employee for an employer where all the employees join the public employees retirement system, they're going to enter this new Tier 5, and in which case their contribution is going to remain the same at 9%, except under this new plan, 4% of that's going to the standard PERS program, although the benefits have changed considerably in Tier 5. 5% of their contribution, their 9%, is going to their defined contribution plan, which is equivalent to a standard private sector 401k plan. The state, however, the employer, is going to continue to contribute the same amount they do now for all PERS employees.
That's correct.
Except that only 9% of it, right, is going to their defined contribution plan. The rest of it's going to PERS. Did I get that right?
Well, it's close. The DB portion, that is correct. 4% is going in, and while people talk about from the employee, they talk about their benefits being less. That is less than half of what they're contributing currently.
Yeah, so they get less benefits.
Are in line with it. The DC is money on behalf of the employee that belongs to the employee. The employer is continuing to put up the 17.9 that's going to 19.9, and that goes toward the UAL. There is not, as drafted in Tier 5, a dedicated match on the DC. There is a optional variable match. It's why they're looking at a 401A style plan so that can be done. Of course, the plan sponsor, the state, is responsible for the DB piece. So yes, they're putting up to pay for the defined benefit.
Okay.
But there is not a definitive match going into the PERS employees' defined contribution. That is one of the ways that we're going to address some of our employer concerns, is that we're going to be able to offer optional variable matches that may help us to recruit or retain employees, but there is not a defined amount going into a defined contribution from the state.
I apologize. You know what? I confused that with the changes you're making in the ORP. That's where I got confused, where we are contributing.
That's correct.
But problem right now is we're contributing way more than the 9% they're putting in from the state side.
That's correct.
Under the current program, and your goal is to cap that. That's and correct. Have the state continue to contribute the same amount, but capping it to the amount that goes to the individual employees plan, leaves the rest of it to go to PERS to help out with the unfunded liability.
That's correct, to the tune of $35 to $40 million.
Okay. Yeah. So the employers have discretion to contribute more to the defined contribution portion under this new tier. The other main feature that we want to point out about this new tier is that cost of living adjustments are optional and would require legislation, right?
That's correct. Well, the legislature would determine, on an annual basis on a COLA. And Senator Hob Bryan and I have had these conversations. Of course, Senator Bryan was around when all the other PERS legislation
was the only one in the Senate, right?
That's right. But he referred to a COLA for those. He calls it an old age COLA. He was referencing 70. 70's not near as old as it looked a few years ago. But I do agree with him, and the good thing is no Tier 5 employee has been hired yet. March 1st to 26th would be that hiring date, and they're 20 or 30 years away or more from retiring. Yeah. So by that time, if we've stabilized the system, the state has found a dedicated source of revenue, there will be a COLA. But actuarially, we can't put a fixed COLA in it, or it does not fix our problem.
That's what got us in trouble.
That's correct.
That's what got. All right, let's talk about taxes. We learned last week, of course, that the House was going to concur with the House bill that essentially got struck and replaced with the Senate plan, which also brought into it the Tier 5 program for PERS, which you had been involved in. That was a separate legislation. That was included. We were all shocked last Thursday when we learned, wait, the House concurred, and then we found out subsequent that there's a misplaced decimal point or two in the language. And apparently the House said, yeah, we can live with this on this basis. Essentially, and it looks like the governor's going to sign it today. So it's essentially, the way I've kind of described it, Senators, that we really don't have any triggers, and that was the goal of the Senate, was to make sure that we achieve certain economic outcomes, if you will, or measurements that would make, I guess, everybody feel okay about reducing the income tax. I would say we really don't have any triggers at this point.
Well, first of all, I would congratulate those who celebrate the governor, Speaker White, Speaker Gunn, Chairman Lamar. This has been a point of major desire for them for several years, and so I think it's a positive thing for the state of Mississippi. We've had economic wins the last few years, and I think this is just one more draw. It's a positive. So I'm also quite proud of Chairman Josh Harkins and the Senate and Lieutenant Governor Hoseman, because we held the line from increasing Mississippian sales tax. Sales tax increase was going to be a 21.4% increase to go from 7% to 8.5%. So there are folks on both sides of this that are proud of what we're doing. The infrastructure piece with 3 cents over 3 years, $212 million to MDOT, that is a dedicated fund to them that goes to state aid, multimodal, and MDOT. All these things are good. Grocery tax goes from 7 to 5 immediately, or I say immediately, July 1st.
Yeah.
And we have 5 years of income tax that we already are doing, which is to go from 4.4 to 4 this coming year. Then we'll go from 4 to 3 over 4 years with quarter-point cuts. Then we get to the point that the debated triggers would come into effect. So we're 5 years away from that. So I don't want what some people seem to find humor, and we have a great political cartoonist, and he does a wonderful job drawing cartoons, but we're missing the forest for the trees. We've got 5 more years of returning taxpayer dollars to Mississippians before these triggers come into play. The other thing nobody talks about with the trigger, which, by the way, 85% of 1% is 0.0085, which is also 0.85%. So I would say I took my legislator hat off when people really started picking at the bill, and I put my lawyer hat on. And I've read the bill, and I think there's some very interesting language in the bill. So I'm excited the governor's signing it. I'm excited we're moving on the pathway. But there's a first trigger that everybody forgets about, and that's a full rainy day fund. So I heard some House members lamenting we were going to cut the entire income tax out in 1 year. I have no idea where they got that. But if we have financial downturn, the rainy day fund will not be full. Therefore, you don't go to the trigger calculation. there is no cut in that year. So I want to make sure Mississippians understand we are not foolishly eliminating the income tax. We are still moving in a methodical, conservative, reasonable approach to the elimination of the income tax, because you've been around and seen at times where governors had to reach into the rainy day fund to shore up budgets, because we have to run a balanced budget in Mississippi. We don't get to do what the federal government does. So they need to go back and read the bill a little bit more, because nobody's talked about the first part of the trigger, which is the cash stabilization fund, the rainy day fund being full. The Senate's position is that needs to move from 10% of appropriations to 12% of revenue, which will add about $300 million. And that's $300 million that I want the growth off of it to go where? You guessed it, PERS, unfunded actuarial liability. We'll pick up another $12-15 million on that. So I'm very proud of the work that we've done. And I will go ahead and say this, and Chairman Harkins, I'm going to tell you, there's two types of people in this world. They're the type of people, when they hand a 10 at the cash register to pay for something, and the clerk reads it as 100 and gives you change for 100, there's the type of people who tell them and give the money back, and there's the type of people that walk out the door and spend it. And Josh Harkins is the type of guy that has the integrity to say, you need to get your money back. This is not what we bargained for. So I'm very proud of him and the work that he's done, and the Senate trying to find this pathway for our fellow Republicans. Because when we start talking about concessions amongst Republicans, that's how they talk in Washington when they talk about two different parties. So I'm excited the governor is going to put pen to paper today, because we will have done two things. We will have addressed the largest liability that the state of Mississippi faces, stabilizing PERS, and we will have cut the income tax and given opportunity in the future for elimination. And that's a good day in Mississippi, no matter which end of the building you're on.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I hadn't really thought about, Josh mentioned it to me in passing, about the other aspect of the trigger, dealing with the budget stabilization fund, the rainy day fund. So bottom line is, if we're not throwing off excess cash, we don't even get to the trigger calculation.
Right. So it's a good day, but it's a reasonable day. And we also are committed not to borrow money to pay for this. We believe growth's going to pay for it. The proponents of the plan believe the growth's going to pay for it, and we expect them to do that. Hey, we'll send over clarification language in Senate Bill 3095, and they can sign it or not.
Senator Daniel Sparks has been our guest. Final segments next.